stay with that story and bring in now IRS forensic investigator Chad Thomas. Chad, a very good evening to you. Is there any doubt in your mind that Nandipha Magudumana is a flight risk, that even if her travel documents were taken from her, that she would still try to flee, given the fact that she was in fact on the run with Thabo Bester?
A very good evening to you. There's no doubt in my mind that she poses a flight risk. You must remember she was a part of the planning of a very sophisticated and audacious escape. She fled the borders of South Africa with a very notorious person who was being sought actively by the authorities. She was able to evade the border control. She was able to evade the authorities while on the run with this notorious Thabo Bester. I do believe that she's learned a lot from that experience. Not just in the planning, but in the actual execution, of which she was an active participant.
And is that the major thing working against her application for bail at this stage, the fact that regardless of the circumstances, she had skipped the country, even though her team says it was basically under duress?
Well, she's changed her story. Initially, she tried to hold the authorities liable by saying that they had brought her back to South Africa by force and had basically abducted her. Now she's saying she was abducted and taken to Tanzania by force. Surely then the police, both the South African and the Tanzanian authorities, would have been her saviors, not her captors. So this flip-flopping isn't helping her case at all.
And Chad, on the issue then of Nandipha Magudumana's posture in court, especially the times that she and Thabo Bester have appeared together. I mean, today the state brought it up again that they seem to be having a good time as they sat side by side in the dock very recently, in fact, catching up and one trying to find out how the other had been doing. Yet her legal team says it's not true that the fact that she sat there with Bester and had some level of conversation means that she was not, let's say, a woman taken from her home against her will. Can both things be true?
She does a disservice to women who suffer from battered woman syndrome and women that are involved in GBV relationships. If one looks at the way in which she conducted herself in the dock, and if one looks at her previous court applications, she's changed her tune completely. It doesn't take a genius or somebody that's a body language examiner, analyst, or expert to have seen the way that they were looking at each other, speaking to one another while they shared the dock. So, like I said at the outset, her flip-flopping has come back to bite her.
But how does one even begin to test a claim such as what Nandipha Magudumana has put before the court, that she was taken against her will, when the state is saying so many other things line up to prove that there was collaboration, deep collaboration between her and the murderer and a rapist, Thabo Bester, who were also told she was, still is possibly, in a romantic relationship with? Because as things stand, we've got her version. The state says that's not true. How do we test it, that she was taken against her own will?
Well, this is the interesting part. We don't know the full extent of the state's investigation. We don't know what they've obtained in terms of their Section 205 subpoena powers. We don't know which of the witnesses and co-accused may have decided to take a plea option in terms of Section 105 of the Criminal Procedure Act, or may even be offered immunity in terms of Section 204 of the Criminal Procedure Act. So right now, we're playing this guessing game, not knowing the full extent of the state's investigation. The state's not going to give in by giving the full benefit for everybody to understand where they're coming from. There will come a time where they'll share their full investigation findings with the defense, and that normally happens once a plea is given and a date is set for trial. But before then, the state is going to hold its cards very close to their chest. And I do believe that they wouldn't be pursuing the case as aggressively as they are if they didn't have sufficient evidence at hand.
I asked a question during coverage of this bail hearing last week whether we were beginning to see the beginning of Magudumana and Bester turning on each other, given that they are the main accused in this case. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, and if perhaps the two of them, given whatever bond they may share, criminal and otherwise, have perhaps agreed that the best thing to do here is throw Bester under the bus or throw everything at him, given that whichever way this case goes, he remains in custody because he's already a convicted rapist and murderer anyway.
He's a narcissist. He's never going to take the full rap and blame, and he's never going to allow himself to be thrown under the bus either. Whatever love or pretense of love exists between himself and Nandipha, what we may see is her finally seeing the light and trying to get immunity or indemnity from charges the state will have nothing of that. What the state may do is consider a 105A plea bargain with her and the defense. But as it stands right now, this case has got so many accused, so many witnesses. As sophisticated as it was, it left a trail, both cyber as well as in respect of evidence, whether it's bodies, whether it's vehicles, whether it's safe houses, whether it's the purchase of items. This is still going to be very, very protracted. And what I said from the outset is the show is going to continue, because we're going to see a lot of side shows coming about in respect of the fraud matters that are going to be brought to the fore, because somebody had to fund this, and they never had the money to fund this. So they had to find people that they could dupe or scam. So there's still going to be a lot of the Nandipha and Thabo show to continue.
Added to that, it'll be interesting to see if Magudumana does actually tell us about these prominent business people and government officials who she claims have done her bad or wronged her during the course of everything that's gone on. But on that point of where we are in terms of the various allegations, and where you say they basically started to make mistakes, is that purely because they'd managed to pull this off for almost a year, where Bester was out and about? I mean, let's all go back to when he was actually identified. The man was getting groceries as if he wasn't a convicted murderer and rapist on the run. Did they simply think that everyone was too stupid to catch on?
It's a very sad indictment of where we stand as a country, when criminals can parade themselves quite openly and think that money can buy them anything. In this case, money did buy Thabo Bester freedom, although it was curtailed when he was spotted at that well-known retail store near Hyde Park. But the fact remains is that organized crime exists when you have a disorganized police force. And this is by no stretch of the imagination an organized crime. A lot of planning went in, a lot of people were corrupted, a lot of things had to be bought, planned for. So in respect of me making the statement that we have a disorganized police force, we do see successes. We do see the police coming together, like we saw on Friday with the CIT ambush of the suspects. But the reason I call the police force at this point in time disorganized is that we are suffering from a skills deficit in terms of the numbers of detectives. We don't have sufficient budget for the detective upskilling that's required. The Hawks only have half the budget they need to be fully capacitated, and that results in organized criminals feeling that they are above the law and that they in some way have the control. We need to see more incidents like we saw on Friday, where the police are turning the tide on crime, where we're seeing intelligence-driven investigations resulting in the takedown of criminals. Until we see this as a regular occurrence, you're going to have the arrogance that was displayed by Thabo and Nandipha continuing, like we've seen with tenderpreneurs driving the best cars, living in the greatest homes. It's not going to stop until there's more examples set.
Chad Thomas, good to speak to you. IRS forensic investigator speaking to us tonight on News at Prime.